Good afternoon, supporters of Minneapolis Public Schools. My name is Heather Anderson. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about what happened on the October 10th school board meeting. So first up, there was a lot of public comment from school bus drivers. So a thing that has happened is that recently, because of school bus shortages, like school bus driver shortages, the district has offered incentives and higher pay in order to attract new drivers. The sort of unhappy thing that happened with that is that our current school bus drivers who've been driving our buses and our children through the streets of Minneapolis for 26 years are now making less than someone who's been on the job for 3 days. So that's what a group of school bus drivers was going to talk about, along with their really deep commitment and why they commit to driving school buses in Minneapolis through cold at 4:00 in the morning. And even though kids sometimes stand up on seats. So I don't know what the district will do with that, but that was very much a theme for public comment. And then for the content part of the meeting, we learned a little bit about what the district is hoping to change around site councils. But the real meat of the meeting had to do with this thing called intervention triads. So remember last week we talked a little bit about COVID money. So the federal government gave us a sum of money to help us with pandemic learning and with COVID learning and now with learning loss. That money has to get used up or sent back to the federal government by September of 2024. So this superintendent really wanted to use some of this money to directly think about learning loss and to directly address it. So she did this. She took students who have had 2 years of non-growth, or they're 2 years behind and not actively making academic growth. And she created this system where we have these things called intervention triads. An intervention triad is made up of one licensed educator and 2 educator support folks. And the idea is that they're going to take those kiddos in every single building across the district, any kiddo who meets that criteria, they're going to bring them out of the classroom or push into their classroom and do high dosage direct instruction to the things or to the for what those children need, right? So the superintendent really risked a lot. She spent $30 million on this strategy, and her goal was to be able to show at the end of this year, okay, we have been able to show that by doing this system, these kiddos are now making this much growth. And so therefore, even when the COVID money runs out, I think there are students or people, or this is an academic strategy that's going to work. So that's what's happened. Now, here's the next part of the story. Because of these intervention triads, right? Lots of classroom teachers. Let's say I teach 3rd grade. Now I'm going to become an interventionist. And now I'm moving out of 3rd grade, which creates an opening in my former 3rd grade class. So we kind of created more positions just for a year. The superintendent was willing to risk that because she really believes that the kids who've lived through the pandemic need to have that direct instruction because they don't get another chance to have an education. And unfortunately, what is the result of that in some schools is that those schools are now not only not having their intervention triads, but they also maybe the superintendent said 3 to 5 schools. Now they're also short in other staff. And of course, because Minneapolis Public Schools is not different from any other urban district in the country, these shortages fall routinely on what we call high poverty schools or schools with populations with a lot of children who receive free and reduced lunch. Now, this has always happened in our district and in districts across the country, but the intervention triad sort of highlighted that, or even brought that to a bigger boiling point, so that there are about 3 to 5 schools in our city that are severely understaffed. I was able to visit one last Friday, and I can say you can feel the tension and you can start to feel the sort of lack of consistency in the air in a building where they're not fully staffed. So this led the board to have a conversation about schools. So what are we going to do for these schools? What's the short-term solution? What's the long-term solution? And hear me say this, the board did talk about several kind of policies or ideas well, how are we going to address this in the future? These are schools that constantly have a problem keeping staff. And they talked about Again, not my opinion, some questions that the board had. Should we as a board just force teachers to go to schools where they're needed? Should we as a board pay stipends or bonuses to schools where we need teachers to go? What can we do to attract teachers to these schools where, as much as these are the kiddos who probably most direly need the triads, right? And most direly need intervention. And now they're not getting that consistent classroom teacher or a triad. And I think my question or my wondering is really, as a board, I would suggest not necessarily thinking about ideas or looking at this from a policy level or from a numbers level. What I would say is let's go talk to the educators who have recently left high poverty schools. Let's ask them why. Let's ask them if there was anything that we as a city or a district could have done to help them stay. And then I also think we should look at the fact that there are high poverty schools in our city that aren't understaffed right now. What's different about them? Maybe we should go to those schools and ask those principals, why are you having full staff? What's different? Why do you choose to stay here, even though it might be a challenging day sometimes? And so rather than thinking about this and pondering about it from one level, I think we should go learn from the folks in the room who are most impacted by this every day. Because maybe there are ideas and solutions that they have that we haven't even thought of yet. So in the meantime, I think there is some conversation around maybe bringing in community partners or maybe looking to organizations or looking, asking around for in philanthropy for support. But I think that we have, kind of long-term and short-term problems to solve here with the staffing. And I myself will be very curious to see the data on the intervention triads and see if this investment did work for students. Because even if, we do need to think about the students who are not making growth in every single Minneapolis public school. As you can tell, it was a very heated discussion. And I think it's because a lot of folks in that room really do care. And really, the problems do really weigh on them at night. You could feel that in the room. And I did appreciate both the board and the superintendent and the cabinet for really being honest with their answers. And for all of us in the room sort of holding that, I found myself nodding a lot and standing up and needing to move and feeling sometimes frustrated and angry. But mostly I just care about the children in the city and I want them to have the educational experience and the knowledge that they need to have the life that they dream of. So that's it for this school board meeting. Check back with us in 2 weeks when we're talking about the committee of the whole. Thanks for listening.